Okay, so we are starting. So I want to welcome everyone to Life, Leadership, and Wellness with Dr. Anthony Jr., that's me. And so I have a very special guest with me tonight. But before that, just want to share Life, Leadership, and Wellness is an organization that I started where I just focus on everything that you just said. I just said life, leadership, and wellness. So that's everything from being a healthier person, anything that can improve our personal, professional development, anything that's working on our health and well-being, and also addressing some areas in our lives when it comes to leadership, because I think all of us are a leader and to some degree. And so we talk about some of those things as well. But tonight we have a very special guest, and I'll introduce her. Her name is Dr. Jordan Cooler. Dr. Jordan Cooler is a pharmacist. She works with me. She's a colleague of mine, and she also works in the counseling and psychiatry department. We try to steal her away from the School of Pharmacy, but she does work for the School of Pharmacy and counseling and psychiatry over here at University of South Carolina. She actually is a board certified psychiatric pharmacist, and hopefully I'm not missing anything else. Oh, she's also a clinical assistant professor in the School of Pharmacy. So this lady comes with a wealth of knowledge and a very good understanding of what we're talking about tonight. So the topic of tonight is, and I will let her say her thank yous and introductions and anything she wants to say before we dive in. However, the topic tonight is something that many of us have concerns about, and that's COVID-19, the COVID-19 vaccinations. Some people, many people, I say us, I'm talking about just people in general, many people have already gotten the vaccine. And I think Dr. Cooler she's also one of the persons who has received the vaccine on the second stage. And so I just wanted her, from her professional viewpoint and also personal, if she may, kind of talk to us about, this vaccine. Some of the questions and concerns that you all have out there, I've heard so many of them, and even myself, I had them. So I thought it would have been good to have someone like Dr. Cooler, from her expertise and her skills and her knowledge, to really kind of expound on some of these things. So I'm gonna turn it over to her for a brief moment if she has any words before we get started, and then we'll just start with some of the questions.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anthony, for having me. I think people often will hear psychiatric pharmacist and feel like, what does that have to do with COVID? But one of the reasons I picked the specialty for psychiatric pharmacy is because oftentimes, psychiatric providers have to be everything for patients with mental illness. And so I like the idea that I was going into a specialty, but I was still going to be expected to know any and everything when it came to drugs, vaccines in this instance. So that's where I feel like I fit in. Good. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, very much needed. And it's funny she said that she's a psychiatric pharmacist, and so you all knew I deal with, mental health and mental illnesses. So it's very important, and you'll see sometimes even how this has affected us. We just came out, we were still in the pandemic, I should say. And so this has really impacted our mental health across the spectrum. So it's also good to have her on there, and if she wants to ever feel free to share any information on that, that's fine as well. So let's get right into some of these questions, because we have several questions from a lot of people, and I think some people can actually not only relate, but would help a lot of people out there, Dr. Cooler. So tell me, so far, what are some of the side effects of the vaccine, of getting this vaccine? And I know we have some of the vaccines out there. We have so far Pfizer and Moderna. And they're kind of working on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but tell me, what are some of the side effects?
I think it'll probably be easiest, for the sake of making things streamlined, to definitely focus on like Pfizer and Moderna, because that's what we have the most information about right now. And so when it comes to these specific vaccines, you'll probably hear me say this time and time again tonight, but it's very fascinating that they ended up being very, 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 very much alike when it comes to a lot of different things that we'll talk about. And so when I speak to the side effects, you can basically say, if it happens with Pfizer, it probably also happened with the Moderna vaccine. And so the most common thing right off the bat, when we're injecting basically anything into our body, is that our body can have a natural reaction right at the injection site. So we usually frame that as an injection site reaction. So what that looks like to people is they might have pain or swelling or redness at the spot in their arm where they get the shot. Usually people have said that kind of starts several hours to potentially the next day after the shot when they receive it. And so that's definitely one of the more common things. followed by that, particularly, it sounds like people are experiencing more reactions past kind of where they get the shot at when it comes to the second injection. But that's not to say that you might not experience it with the first. And so that's things like feeling fatigued or tired. People will talk about like, wow, I went to work and I felt like I needed to take a nap, like take the rest of the day off. You can have headaches, as well as like chills and body aches or muscle aches. And then some people do actually experience a fever. Um, Usually it's low grade fever after the shot, usually short lived, these things I'm talking about right now. So within a day or two, they tend to wear off. And that's primarily because we basically introduced a foreign substance to your body. And so your body, your immune system, if it's doing what it's supposed to, it's gonna react to that and respond. So that's kind of what is happening when you experience those symptoms. And then we'll talk about what that actually means, I'm sure, down the line with some of the other questions.
Okay. Okay. So basically, your arm, when they feel that pain and it's not, their arm's not gonna fall off.
Yes, exactly. Just know that that is normal, and that most people, when that occurs, so after their vaccine, like if you're able to, like if your doctor says it's okay for you to take like ibuprofen or Tylenol or something like that, then you can do that.
Okay.
So after the vaccine.
Okay. And so, because I heard some people, and I'm glad you said that if you take some of the side effects may be the same from both of the vaccines, Pfizer or Moderna. Because I've heard some people saying this could be myth, and you know, we have a lot of myths out there that, oh, well, the Moderna is worse than the Pfizer because, you know, for whatever reason they come up with. And so, but you're telling me it sounds like the side effects may be the same. So does it really matter which one you get?
No, I think so yes, side effects are the same. When you kind of, so granted, in the trials, the studies, like they weren't able to have both of them in the studies, but like when you kind of look at the side effects and like the percent of people who had the side effects, the numbers kind of line up when you look at both sets of the information that's out there. And then as far as determining like, does it matter which one you get? It really, honestly, at this point in time, just kind of depends on what's available at the site that you go to. So technically, the Pfizer vaccine was available a couple weeks before the Moderna one was. So a lot of places got the Pfizer vaccine first. So a lot of people got Pfizer first. They were basically in clinical trials around the same time. It was just a matter of like a race to the finish, like who finished first and then who got the emergency use authorization first from the FDA. But I think now you're seeing more places are actually getting like the Moderna in stock. And so those are the two that have gone through like the FDA approval process right now in the US. And so it really just depends on where you go and then what they have in stock.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Right now, it seems to be, well, you actually just answered my other question because I was going to ask what was more effective, the Pfizer or the Moderna. So you really answered the other question. So tell me now, what do the vaccines, just talk a little bit about or speak a little bit about what the vaccines actually do. How do they protect the person? Do they protect us from getting COVID? You know, will it protect us from other variants of the illness? And then what does that word variant mean? Because we have a lot of people, you know, we throw these terms out. So what does some of this stuff mean? So what does variant mean? And I know I'm asking a loaded question, but like, what does this vaccine protect us from? And does it protect us from COVID? And then also, what does it mean with variants? And does it protect us from all that?
Okay, so I'll start with kind of like the basic run of the mill with the vaccine and then follow up with where the variants kind of play into all of this. So as far as the vaccination goes, I guess it's easiest to kind of start off with like what is happening. You get this shot, you get this injection, and what is it doing inside of your body? It's not gonna give you COVID. We're not giving you like a small dose of COVID, and then it's just letting your immune system build up to that. What they're actually doing, it's really interesting. I guess the best word is technology. So they and I mean the science community has identified kind of what instructions are needed for the body to create what they call the spike protein that's on the outside of any given coronavirus. So you guys have seen that picture of like the giant sphere that has the thing poking off of it. That's the image we always think about when we think about what coronavirus looks like. So those little spikes, the vaccine actually carries the information. So the message that our bodies as humans would need to create our own spike proteins.
Okay.
So then when you get the injection, your body takes that message and is able to then make those spike proteins. And then it's kind of like a Snapchat, the information. So, after a period of time, it disappears. So basically, after the body's used that information, it destroys the information. And so we now have these spike proteins that your immune system can then interact with, learn how to fight off, how to kill it, so that if you do come in contact with the real COVID virus, the real coronavirus, your body will already know how to recognize it and how to fight it off. So the best way I saw it put somewhere was that it's almost like you received the Snapchat message. It said, hey, this is how you make the spikes. Your body says, okay, I'm going to make the spikes. And then your immune system's then able to say, okay, I'm learning about it. And now I know how to fight it off and destroy it, so that the next time you see it, it doesn't have to figure it out. It already knows what to do.
Gotcha. So it's not the actual virus that they're putting in the vaccine, another form of the virus that we're putting in our bodies is something that they created a message to get to our bodies about the virus. And our body kind of mimics or pictures that, or it's like a photo or whatever, and takes a picture of it, but then forgets about it. But then it's like, they remember it, the body remembers it, says, oh, if it comes in, if we are infected, the body says, oh no, I remember this picture.
Exactly, and I know what to do to get rid of it.
Got you. Yeah. So that makes sense. That makes sense. And I'm one of those people who thought, at one point, like, well, the putting the vaccines, that's what the actual illness is in our body. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of amazing, because when you think about like history of vaccines, like that's basically where we started at as far as like how we would make vaccines, and now it's just kind of progressed so far that we figured out that we only need this little snapshot of how to do something, and then our body can take it from there. So that also goes to show just how amazing the human body is.
Yeah, that really is. That really is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's good information. So, and also from my understanding, they're very, well, you already answered that question that I had you doing. We were doing really good with this.
Oh, I forgot. I was supposed to talk about variants, and I was supposed to talk about what happens if you come in contact with COVID after you've had the vaccine. So granted, that immunity, so your body learning how to fight it off, like it's not going to be an instant thing. And so that generally we say that people about 2 to 3 weeks after receiving the second injection, because both the Moderna and the Pfizer are 2 separate doses you have to receive. That's when you would be considered to be immune. So this is 2 parts we have to kind of diverge down now. So both of the vaccines are over 90% effective. So Moderna's roughly 94% effective, and Pfizer is roughly 95% effective. So that's kind of why I said they're basically the same. So that's not 100%. So that means that there's a subset of people who, even though they did the right things, they won't be immune. But for those of us, the vast majority, overwhelming majority of us, if we were to then come in contact with coronavirus after we've reached our immunity period, then we're not going to have those severe infections that cause people to be in the hospital or have those extreme complications. And hopefully also we won't necessarily have any symptoms. So with that comes some limitations. And I think we'll address kind of where the role of mask and things kind of fit in later, but just keep that little nugget in mind.
Okay.
And then as far as the variant piece, I know I said I should address that. So yes, you guys have heard that there's variants out there that have appeared after maybe some of the vaccines were created. And we as in the scientific community is looking into seeing how effective the current versions of the vaccine are with the variants, and each of them has shown some effectiveness against the variants, maybe not as high as that 94-95%. And so that's where they're kind of looking into, do they need to create a version that's going to be more effective and then potentially give us a booster in the future. And so that's kind of where they're looking at that now.
Okay.
So variants basically happen, kind of think about how there's some type of life change and you have to adapt and you have to figure out how to handle new circumstances. Thinking about like a child who's an adult now and they have to adapt to adult life. Viruses can do that same thing. So they figure out ways to adapt and change so that they can better infect us and kind of elude some of our normal treatments. And so that's what's happening when you see these variants, which is unfortunate, but that's kind of a normal part of nature. And so it doesn't necessarily come at a complete surprise that it was possible. It's just kind of now, what do we do to adapt to this adaptation?
Okay. Now, variants are not the same as a strain, or is that the same thing, or meaning?
So the simplest answer is that you can have a strain and then you can have a variant within that strain. Okay. So the terms are sometimes used kind of interchangeably without like getting bogged down into the weeds of like the specific difference. But if you hear, you might hear somebody say like, oh yeah, there's another strain, which may be related to just another variant, or it may just physically be kind of, I think of it like race, like we have different races of people, but we're all people.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's kind of how I think about it.
Okay, I got it. But the variants are like what you said, it's just like it's a form where the virus has adjusted and now evolved into something else. Okay, and that's, okay, thank you for clarifying that. So because right now they're coming, apparently, are they coming out, this Johnson & Johnson, I think vaccine is, what I've heard, rumors, I don't know, scientifically, is this something that's stronger than all these other vaccines to protect against this South African variant or what other variants that may be out there? So are they coming out with something stronger? And, and if they are, the people who've already gotten inoculated, and when I say inoculated, people, I'm talking about vaccinated, getting vaccine, getting the vaccine. So will they have to get re-inoculated? Well, I heard you say something about boost, so just explain that.
Oh yes, so re-inoculated. So another term like would be like you get a booster. So maybe you've already gotten the shot, and for whatever reason, you need kind of a booster to kind of boost your immunity is what that's how we're using the term. So kind of think about like, what's a good example? Like you have to get a tetanus shot and sometimes you might have to get another one. Like that's an example of a booster.
Okay.
And so it will depend as far as like whether you need to get a stronger vaccine. It's going to depend on which vaccine you got initially. And then after they kind of run the tests to kind of see where their efficacy is going to be with the different variants, then they'll determine, okay, well, based off of this specific, say, Pfizer vaccine, and I'm just using this as an example, we found that it's, X% effective, and that is going to meet our threshold, so we don't have to do anything different for you, versus there's another variant and we find that it's below our threshold as far as how effective it is, so we might need to make a new booster where we modify it so that it'll be more effective, and then you could just add that on. There's not a lot of information right now as far as mixing the different vaccines, as far as the different manufacturers. And so that's something that we're just going to have to kind of figure out as time goes as to whether or not we will be needing to mix vaccines. Like if you got the Moderna in the history, but now we have this newer one from Johnson & Johnson or whoever, we'll have to kind of determine that. It's another thing that we'll have to play by ear as we continue with this.
Okay, so we don't really know right now, even if Johnson & Johnson comes out, we don't know that people are going to be able to get that one who already got vaccinated. Okay, and that's good. But could you clarify that now? Because I've heard, and I thought this was the truth, that if a person got the first stage of the Pfizer vaccine, they have to get the second Pfizer. They can't get Moderna next.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of where you probably, everyone has seen on the internet, like you have your little vaccine card. It's like a quick and easy way to see like which vaccine you previously got for the first one, so that they make sure they give you the correct second one. And it's not necessarily automatically that we just assume that something's like bad is going to happen if you mix the vaccines. It's just that we don't have any evidence to prove that you'll get the same immunity by mixing the two. So that's why we want to just keep it consistent the same way that it was studied.
That makes sense. Because my concern then goes out, and then here goes my mind going into my social justice. Well, I won't say social justice, just my humane way of thinking. When you have older people or people who have maybe some learning, some intellectual challenges where they got the Pfizer and then they're like, well, which one did I get? And then they don't remember, do we keep record of that? Do they, if they lost their record, how would they, you know, and then the Moderna, they're like, oh, I got it. I know what I got. I need to go and get the Moderna. But they don't know that they remember they got the Pfizer first. So I don't know about that.
Yeah, so we definitely get the little card that you keep on your person, but I think that the CDC has done a great job of rolling out kind of their vaccine basically tracking website. So like whenever you register to get your vaccine, you register for this online, it's essentially an online portal, and that's where once you get your 2 doses, like you'll actually have a certificate that you can print off from that portal that says you've been fully vaccinated. But when you receive your injection or your shot, they actually go in and say, you know, Jordan received Pfizer first dose. And then when Jordan's able to receive her 2nd dose. So anybody, any of the healthcare providers that are administering the vaccine can log in and pull you up in the system and see, okay, well, actually, it turns out you got Pfizer and we only have Moderna, so we need to get you rescheduled for somewhere else.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That's good. Thank you. So here's another big question we're going into now about, well, I don't know if I should ask this question, so let me back up. There's a young lady, well, I say young lady, there was an older lady actually, who said that she had gotten the vaccine, and I don't know which one she got. It sounded like it might have been the Pfizer, because I think she said she went for the second stage. And so she said a week later, she got COVID-19, or she was diagnosed, from my understanding. And so, like, I don't know the details, but she texted me this earlier today, or messaged me. And so I just wanted to kind of get a response for that question.
Yeah, so that's a common question. And then when other people start to answer it, it turns into myths. So this kind of goes back to, I was speaking about, you get your shots, but then there's kind of this period of time after both shots 1 and 2, there's a period of time for your body to kind of mount up the type of immunity that we need before you're considered immune. So that 2-ish, 3-ish weeks after the 2nd shot. So basically during that time, before you get to that period after the 2nd shot, you might have some immunity, but you're not at that 95, 94%. So if you come in contact with somebody who has COVID and you're not at that full immunity yet, then there is the still chance that you can get COVID. It's kind of similarly to, they'll say like with a flu shot, you know, it's going to take several weeks before it's fully effective. So that's the same thing. The other thing that people who get their first shot and then a couple of days later, if they are positive for COVID, is that they could have potentially come in contact with COVID before they got that first injection. And so there just wasn't any time to kind of prevent them from ending up sick.
Okay. That kind of happened, and I don't want to get too much of my personal story, but my uncle, we were concerned because my uncle had COVID, but he had gotten the vaccine. He wasn't showing, I don't think he was showing any symptoms, or maybe thought he was at the time that he had gotten the vaccine. And then maybe like days later, he was kind of feeling a little bad, and it ended up where he was diagnosed with COVID. I mean, he came through very well, but it was just weird. We were trying to figure out that whole time, to be like, well, what happened and how did he get COVID when he didn't have it before? But he got the vaccine. And so we were just trying to figure that out. So that's helpful to know. That's really good to know. Thank you. So tell me this. This is one of the big questions too. And this kind of relates to maybe me and also you as an African-American female, and then me as an African-American male, you as a Black female, I'm a Black male. And so, and I'm one of those people who said this like, well, you know, when the vaccine first came out, or knowledge of it or information about it, many people in the Black community and minority populations were like, oh no, I'm not putting that in my body. I don't know what that is. We may react differently. You know, some people like myself thought about Tuskegee University with the whole syphilis case. And, you know, that fear and anxiety started to settle in with a lot of people of color. And so I just want you to speak on that. Like, does it have any type of right now showing any reactions to different cultures, different ethnicities, or anything like that?
Yeah, so I probably had some of the same, like, that's just kind of as a Black person
Yeah.
in the US, like that's just always your initial thoughts. I mean, because we know that, I mean, history, it does definitely impact us. So I always tell myself that, you know, I have my initial responses to things, and then I have to think again and try to use, you know, some of the more analytical side of my head and try to use some of the like logic and things like I've rationalized, like going through pharmacy school and training and things like that. So I was like, well, the best way for me to kind of work through any of my concerns is to read up on things and to learn as much as I can. And then also do my best to share information. So it is very nice to see when you look at kind of the study information that's available, to look at like the kind of span and the diversity, and to kind of see the numbers to see, okay, they tested this, but like who did they test it in? And do those people match up with me or people that I'm close to? It's also nice to see that in the studies that they look at the people that they enroll in the studies as a whole, but then they also break them down into like subgroups and seeing if there's any difference between subgroups, like by age or gender or race or ethnicity. And they did that. So they there is difficulty enrolling minorities in trials, as well as getting, I guess, a wide variety of minorities. So that's ongoing. And of course, that was ongoing with this, which is unfortunate, but we know what it stems from. Same reasons as what we were talking about when we were thinking about getting the vaccine. So looking at kind of the breakdown, and I went and I made sure I wrote down the numbers to give people a good perspective in the studies. So for Blacks, people who identify with Blacks, that was 10% of people who were enrolled. So it's under the national percentage of Blacks in the US, but it's pretty close. It's only off by a couple percentage points. 20 to 26% were Hispanic or Latinx, and then 4 to 5% were Asian. So those are actually pretty good numbers for a study. So even though it seems like a small percentage, like minorities are represented in the information. They also looked and broke it down, and they didn't find any differences, clinically significant differences, when they looked at subgroups of people. So based off of gender or age or race or ethnicity. But I thought it was interesting that normally we worry about older people when it comes to side effects and things, but actually some of those side effects I thought at the beginning, they were more common in younger people. So yeah, so it seemed like a lot more young people were experiencing like the headaches and the body aches and the fevers and things like that. So I think we do have a lot of information though about the disparities of minority and underserved populations being infected with COVID, and also maybe the care that they're receiving and then their outcomes with COVID. And so knowing that, that's another reason why I think it's very important that we know something that will work as far as helping to prevent infection or prevent symptomatic or severe infection. So like we got to do the best that we can to get the vaccine out into those populations.
So basically what I'm hearing is that it is important that it's important for all people maybe to get vaccinated, but then it's definitely for people who, minority populations, they should get vaccinated, because going back to some of the disparities that we have going on in that population, we have a lot of, I think I talked about it before in another platform, about the social determinants, the inequities of social determinants we have in health when it comes to minority population. And so that's good to know that because of that, now you're saying from your clinical and professional recommendations that people of minority, people of color should get the vaccine because of that very reason. That's good to know. With that, and you did mention something about older people, like we would think about older people having a different type of effect from the vaccine. So do they need to be mindful of like anything because of their age or particular health conditions? Even though you've shown from your numbers that younger people are experiencing more symptoms or side effects than older people, but do older people, well, she's 65 and older, because my mom is 65 or older. And so do they need to be mindful of any, because of the health conditions, any underlying conditions or anything like that due to in taking this vaccine?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, as far as when we think about the reason a person needs a vaccine, but then also the potential side effects of a vaccine. So older people are probably going to be more likely to have some of those like serious underlying conditions, like having like a weakened immune system, or maybe they have like active or history of cancer, or having like asthma. Those are things that would be considered like a serious condition in which they would want you to get the COVID vaccine because you have the potential of having a more severe case of COVID if you were to catch it. So we have that side of things, but then also when you actually look at certain conditions and do they increase your risk of like having a severe allergic reaction, there's actually no no conditions that right now the CDC is saying if you have this then you cannot get the vaccine right now. If someone's like acutely sick in the hospital, then they want like physicians and providers to do kind of a risk versus benefit assessment to see if, okay, right now, do we want to get the vaccine or wait? But there's not anything that they have kind of in the red box that says, if you have this, you can't get the vaccine.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to history of allergies, that's a different story.
Okay, thank you. Because I was going to ask that, because my mom, and I'll use my mom for an example, my mom can't, she's allergic to penicillin and amlodipine. I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
Amlodipine.
Yeah.
So she cannot have. And so people like her are worried. And my aunt, she cannot take anti-inflammatory, anything with anti-inflammatory ingredients or agents in it. So those are people who want to know like that, like, should they take the vaccine considering that?
Yeah, and
so they should still consult with their doctors, but I'm just asking.
Yeah, so they've gotten really specific now, because at first it's like, okay, should we exclude everybody who has drug allergies? And so they've actually been able to kind of tease it out even further. And so first of all, they kind of break the allergies into two different things. So if you have like anaphylaxis, throat closing up, you stop breathing, severe allergic reaction, and then people who might have, I guess, an allergy to a lesser extent. So like you might start itching or break out in like hives or a rash. And so then they look at, so if you had a first dose of the shot and you have an anaphylactic reaction, so the throat closing up, severe, like life-threatening allergic reaction, then they're going to say, okay, no, we're not doing the second injection. Or if you have had that reaction in the past to any of some of like the inactive ingredients in the vaccine, because it's active vaccine, but of course we have to mix it with some inactive fillers so that we can get it into the body. If you've had that reaction before to any of those components, which you can easily get a list of those from the CDC, and most people who've had an allergy to those things, it'll be things like polyethylene glycol, which the only reason you would ever know that is if you've had a reaction to that before. Then you wouldn't be able to get the vaccine. If you've had some of the lesser allergic reactions, then that would be a discussion like with your doctor to determine like, again, the risk versus the benefit. And then also the other group, so aside from the actual vaccine itself, if you've had that anaphylaxis, serious life-threatening reaction to any other injection, whether it's another vaccine or whether it's like a injected medicine you get like in the hospital, then that's the other group of people that they want to hold off on. But other than that, it's either just have the conversation with your doctor and determine. But otherwise, those are the big categories of people who just can't get it based on an allergy standpoint.
Okay. And going back, and I know I'm kind of getting specific with my eyes. So basically, I would encourage them to talk with their doctor specifically, because if my aunt cannot take anything with anti-inflammatory, I wouldn't know she probably wouldn't know what that was in Pfizer or Moderna. So she would need to just tell them that.
Yes.
They would know whether she could be able to take that or not.
Yeah, and it's nice because when you go, you actually fill out this I think it's called like a pre-vaccine questionnaire, and it'll ask you like if you've had any allergies, and then they can talk to you about it then. Right on the spot, and they ask you the questionnaire both times just in case something changed in the last 21 or 28 days.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. Because I had some people who were really concerned about that. Has anyone, now this is another question, I think I've asked you this as a colleague walking down the hall one day. It's like, has anyone, well, I've heard when this vaccine started coming out, people start taking it, someone died from the vaccine. And you might have kind of addressed this in the earlier statement that you said earlier about that window of immunity and everything, but has anyone reportedly died from getting any of the vaccines itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. Get that a lot. So I'll kind of break it up into what we know from like the studies and then today as of February 10th. So in the studies, they basically will list anything that could possibly be a side effect or like an outcome from like the vaccine and the vaccine group, and then like the people who took placebo. And they did not have any deaths in the studies that they directly linked to the vaccine. As you know, I mean, unfortunately, like day to day, people are going to pass on. And so they're able to kind of delineate, okay, someone in a study, if someone died, like, was it something completely unrelated, or was it probably because of the medication or the vaccine? And so they didn't have any of those specifically related to the vaccine. So then kind of the same thing when after the vaccine kind of gets out to the rest of us in the general population, like we have to look at that as well to determine like, okay, was this probably from the vaccine or was it something else? And so what we're finding when you get these reports from the news where people are dying, when you actually delve in, there's a lot of things that could have contributed to the person dying. They just so also happened to get the vaccine within that time frame. And so right now, a lot of anytime someone dies and after they've received the vaccine, they're having to go back and like research and say, okay, well, this person died, they got the vaccine, but it turns out they died in a car accident. Or I think another big case, it was in Europe, and there was a subset of like nursing home patients that died, and they had also recently gotten the vaccine, but it turns out that they actually have data on how many people in nursing homes, thinking about how ill they are or how old they are, what's kind of the average number of people that would pass in any given period of time. And they're seeing that it's not any elevated compared to the past. So that's just kind of what we're going to have to keep doing over time. And then if we do start to see people that there's really no other reason why they could have died, then they're going to have to delve into that more to figure out what the cause could be.
Right.
So I guess the short answer is that it's too soon to say like, oh yes, more people are dying because they got the vaccine.
Right. But you also did a good job in explaining, because sometimes, I'll say it like this: we hear of a death and somebody may say, oh, it's because of the vaccine, but we don't know that no, it was something else that they, had, they were impacted by, or they had another illness, or, they were sick, or just maybe a vast number of people were exposed to something else. Or they, like you said, the nursing home, this was already something that was, pretty much, likely to happen.
It sounds like really bad to say, but
Right, exactly. No, but you help put that in perspective so that we won't, because see, our minds, when we hear people automatically, and this working as a psychiatric pharmacist, in our department, when people hear something or they see something, it impacts them, based on their past experiences or what their mind is telling them out of fear and anxiety. So we get that. So thank you for that. Are they, what about, I guess, anything that people, and I know we're still new in receiving these vaccines, any residual effects from these vaccines? I know you talked about the side effects and things like that, but anything that's long lasting so far that you hear of people still dealing with or have not had before? Like an example, if somebody was not coughing a lot before and now the vaccine, they're coughing a lot, or somebody had, I don't know, low blood sugar, now they have high blood sugar because of the vaccine, anything?
No, those are good examples, I think. So no, not at this time. Again, so similarly to how they look at like death and determine like one way or the other, like was this the cause of the vaccine? They do that with all of the side effects or things that just happened that seemed like it was out of the ordinary, but maybe it really wasn't out of the ordinary. And so we don't have any of those. I think it was as far as like this is the opportunity I always think about. Like it's good to kind of do a comparison because there's still obviously so much we don't know about COVID-19. But it's been, I mean, it's been a year since the first death in the US from COVID already. So we've learned a lot in a year, and we have a lot of information about some of the long-term impacts of COVID, even if you survive COVID and the things you have to deal with afterwards. And so when I was kind of thinking about it for myself, it's like, well, there's a lot of things like I feel like you can't be too afraid of the unknown when the known is staring you right in the face.
Right.
And so things just like, I mean, I am still barely still in my 20s, which I'm going to hold on to that as long as I can. But
Not to interrupt you, she said she's barely in her 20s, but she look at all this information that she knows, and she's not just talking because she Googled stuff. Now she's a trained pharmacist. She's skilled. She's knowledgeable. She's educated. She graduated. She's board certified. So I'm just reiterating, and we use her. And let me tell you, in counseling psychiatry. See, I'm bragging on you now. Counseling and psychiatry. We use her a lot because she knows the information and what's helpful for students or people to understand how medications work, some of their anxieties about medications, some of their, the lack of knowledge about certain things that they're taking into their body. And, she does it, y'all. She's very helpful for us and has proven that, time after time. So anyway, that's my, I digress. But
well, thank you. I appreciate it. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So I have peers, people who I went to like undergrad with who got COVID, and now they have to see a doctor like for their heart and see a doctor for their lungs, like things that they never thought they would be worried about in their late 20s and early 30s. And so those type things to me, like if I can do something that, even down the line, like potentially could prevent that for me, like that's how I'm kind of looking at things.
Okay.
And I think also too, you just don't know which COVID patient you'll be. You'll be the one, are you going to be the one who has mild symptoms, or are you going to be the one that's in the ICU and had no other underlying conditions? You just don't
Right.
know with that. And you just kind of see what it's been doing. And it's just been hard to kind of wrap your head around. So that's kind of where I was coming from when making decisions.
So that's good. I appreciate it. Thank you for that. And actually, personally, if you don't mind me saying, because I think you shared it, you received the vaccine.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
You got.
I've done both.
You did both. The Pfizer.
Yes, Pfizer. So they were 21 days apart, and the Moderna is 28 days apart.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I'm about 2 weeks out. So I'm almost there into my period of where I should be at my immunity, as long as I'm in the 95%, right? So I actually had I won't say pleasant because my arm really did hurt, but that's really the only thing that happened with both of them for me. So I was fortunate enough where I didn't have a lot of like the body aches and like no fever or anything after the second one. But my arm did really hurt.
I heard that.
Yes, like to the point where, because I remember, especially after the first one, I remember going to bed that night and I was like, my arm doesn't hurt. I don't know what people are talking about. And then it woke me up in the middle of the night like 3 times because I rolled over on it.
Yeah. I understand. And that's common from what I hear. Actually, good leading into my, almost the last question, but the other question is that, how long do these vaccines last? And you might have actually already said it, and I might have missed it, like how, because you said, within the period of immunity, but then after you get the vaccine, is it something like, because I know you mentioned, let me go back, you said something about boosters and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, but with this vaccine, with Pfizer or Moderna, or even if they come up with Johnson & Johnson, when do people need to get the next one? If they do need to get, how often does this need to occur or get inoculated?
So, I kind of always put things in the perspective of like how long we've known about COVID, and then very soon afterwards with Operation Warp Speed, like the plan was to figure out a vaccine. So when they provided the initial results, we had data at about 90 days, so 3 months. It'd been 3 months out from the injections. And so kind of we're still just following those people. And so the plan is to do this kind of surveillance where people get the vaccine and we just kind of follow along and see what happens. And they can do that in a lot of different ways. Like they can have people who actually enroll and like go into it planning to be followed, where they get checked in on as far as like, have you had COVID? Have you had a positive test? Repeat testing people. They can also look at it from a larger scale where they take like a certain area of the country and they say, okay, this number of people, this percentage of people got the vaccine, and then compare it to how many cases of COVID they have, and just do comparisons that way. And so I say all that to say is that we're still watching to see. And if we start to see that, okay, people are getting vaccinated and they've been vaccinated and it's been X amount of time, but it seems like we're having more cases pop up, then that's when they have to start looking at, okay, is this going to be like the flu shot where you have to get a new flu shot every year? Okay. Or will it be nice, like I mentioned the tetanus vaccine earlier, where you get one and you have to think about it for 10 years. So, right. So there's still a lot of unknown there. But right now we're just kind of trucking along, and I guess we'll have to cross that bridge if/when we get there.
Right. And that's really good. It is actually hopeful and actually somewhat encouraging to know that we are at least in a better place than what we were a year from now. You know, whether people believe in the vaccine or not, or believe in getting it, or believe in its effectiveness, you know, there are measures. This is actually leading into my last final question, or, you know, a question that I know we all can answer, you know, but it does help to, all this information too that you provided helps to, at least for me, it gives hope to knowing that we're making some progress towards something, and that, you know, we're in the at least right pathway to becoming healthier or combating this virus or this disease. So I appreciate that. I guess my last question before I even have you give any remaining remarks too is that once a person is vaccinated, do we still need to wear our mask? And I'm looking directly at the camera because I want you to understand.
I got one right here. Yes, so remember, everybody, remember what I said. So I've said lots of different little nuggets that you can piece together and provide the why as to why we need to wear a mask still, why we need to keep washing our hands, why we need to give people their personal space. And that's just because we know that these have really, really, really high numbers as far as like efficacy, but there's still going to be that person who does the right thing, get their vaccine, and for whatever reason is not going to have that same immunity. So we need to think about those people. We need to think about the people who can't get the vaccine for those reasons we talked about with allergies. We need to think about people who can't get the vaccine right now because maybe they're in a later phase. And then we know that the vaccine will help prevent us from being symptomatic and prevent us from having those serious infections that will put you in the hospital. But we still don't know a lot about, well, kind of with the asymptomatic carriers, like can that still apply to somebody who's had the vaccine? And that's something that we just won't fully be able to hash out until we've had more time with it. And so just kind of thinking about that, and then also thinking about the people who have had COVID and maybe they have some natural immunity because they've had COVID and they're not getting the vaccine right now. We don't know how long that's going to last as well. And so that person could be immune one day and then not immune the next day. And so we just kind of have to think about all those moving parts that we just don't have any control over.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So, well, I don't have any other questions for you. I think I asked so much from you, and even probably some additional information that I asked, and that you gave some additional information as well. I really appreciate that. Is there anything that you would like to say, or any remaining comments, or any helpful information that you would like people to know about there as they're looking at this?
Yeah, I think I always say it to my students who come to me for medication education. Even though I am a pharmacist, so that means that I am a drug person. It's not my goal to try to convince people to take things that they don't need or that they won't benefit from. I try to look at myself more of kind of the middle person between all that's out there information wise, and kind of trying to condense it into what do you as the consumer need to know to make a sound decision. A co-worker slash mentor of mine said it, especially thinking about for minorities, he feels like he has to be that credible voice for them. And so kind of taking everything and giving it to them straight. Like, if we don't know something, then I'm going to tell you, we don't know yet, but here's what we do know. And so hopefully with this today, you all feel like you got that. So
yeah. I know I have, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people out there have too as well, because like I said, I know you come across a lot of questions being in the field that you're in. I know people bombard you with maybe a lot of questions. They probably think that you walk on water, because sometimes when you have a certain position in the field, or, expertise or a certain skill in a certain area, they think that you know everything about it. But I do appreciate your time, your energy, your spirit, your knowledge on the subject matter. The conversation that we had, I think it was very helpful. It was helpful for me, and I know it was helpful for a lot of other people out there. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Cooler. Again, this is Dr. Jordan Cooler. She is a clinical assistant professor at the School of Pharmacy, and she's also a board certified psychiatric pharmacist. She also does work in counseling and psychiatry. I have to say that because I love her. We don't want her to leave here, but she works with us too, working with our students and our staff on educating us about the drugs and the medications that are out there and prescriptions that people, are using and possibly using, will use in the future. So she does a really good job on her consultations and whatnot. So I really hope that you take all this information that she's had seriously, or, and take it in. This was really just to educate and bring awareness to the subject matter, because many of us had so many questions and concerns. And it does help us leave here with making our best informed decision on subject matters like this. So it's very important that we are, like she said, very educated on these things and receiving them from people who work in the field and who in their craft. This is what they went to school for. This is what they were trained for, and this is what they were tested and proven for. So I want you all to take this seriously and just to take heed, and also continue to be safe. We're not out of the woods yet. We have not, like she said, we're still learning so much about this disease, about this illness, within this time period. And I'm giving it this year that we'll be done with it, hopefully. That's just me. Hopefully speaking. But we're still learning information about this. And as we are learning some, maybe months down the line, we'll do another one of these, or as things change, you know how I go, we will do things based on the need and what will be relevant to our communities. But I think we just need to be mindful and continue to be cautious and safe. Wear your mask in public settings, not just for yourself, but those who, are vulnerable adults, and also wash your hands constantly and continuously, when you're out and about or doing things, even in your own homes or whatnot, just wash your hands. Safe distancing, social distancing, physical distancing. So we want to make sure that we're keeping 6 feet apart, or just abide by the law, just abide by the guidelines, abide by the ordinances that are given within these establishments, these stores and these other places. We don't want to make a fuss about anything, but just abide by those rules and regulations. And I think we can really get a lot further and discover a whole lot more about this disease as we continue to minimize that by our precautions. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thank you again, Dr. Cooler, so much. Who knows, may have you on for something else one day. You never know, because life, leadership, and wellness, we talk about a whole range of stuff. We deal with health and wellness, so I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I always say I don't have a lot to say, and then you just get me started and just talk.
Well, you really talked a good bit about a lot of things that we needed to know about. So if you do need to reach me, and I don't want to, if you can reach me, and if Dr. Cooler ever wants to give information out based on what she does, that's fine. But if you want to reach me, or you have additional questions, you can reach me at info@DrAnthonyJr.com. Again, that's info@DrAnthonyJr.com. That's my email address. You can reach out to me. My website will be up for sometime soon. But again, you'll see me on Facebook and other social media platforms with Life, Leadership, and Wellness with Dr. Anthony Jr. And so I really appreciate you all. I didn't say who I am or what I do, but I'm a certified life coach. And I do life coaching in various areas. I'm also a board certified biblical counselor, board certified Christian counselor. So those are my credentials, along with some other things that I won't get into. But however,
I get you to do a lot of things, just at counseling psychiatry.
just email me and I'll let you know. But thank you all for tuning in. I hope this information was helpful, and share it out and just spread the wealth, spread the knowledge. So thank you and be safe.
All right, take care.
Hey there. So I want to thank you for joining this segment of Life, Leadership, and Wellness with me, Dr. Anthony Jr. And I hope that some of your questions were answered and many of your concerns were addressed as we interviewed with Dr. Cooler on some of the information surrounding the COVID-19 vaccinations. I thought that she presented some valuable information as it would help us make some conscious and well-informed decisions towards our health and well-being. So remember to wear your mask, be physically distanced appropriately, and wash your hands regularly, okay? So stay safe, be healthy, and also be mindful not only of yourselves, but also those who are around you. If you want to reach out to me, you can do so. Again, my email is info@DrAnthonyJr.com. I also have a Facebook page, and that's Dr. Anthony Jr. On Twitter, it's @DrAnthonyJr, Dr. Anthony Jr. And Instagram is Dr. Anthony Thompson Jr., Dr. Anthony Thompson Jr. So until next time, I look forward to sharing with you again soon.